The Void, Book 1. An audio novel by Alan Westwood. Chapter 1, The Departure. Sol 47, Year 669 of the Martian Era of Humanity, ME, 3302 CE, Earth Calendar. Mission Day, -1. In geosynchronous orbit above Mars' largest settlement, the pale light of the Martian sky filtered through the domes of RCA Mons spaceport, casting a golden hue over the sleek, luminescent hull of the Mars Administration Starship Sojourner. Docked in silence, it radiated a sense of readiness, an embodiment of humanity's resilience. Within the bridge, holographic displays shimmered with the trajectories of distant stars and the mission's objectives. Commander Elena Vera sat at the command console in her crisp new flight suit, strapping her safety harness into the chair. Her green eyes were sharp and focused as they scanned the dynamic, holographic interface before her. Each star projected represented a step closer to unifying human settlements, a goal critical amidst the ideological chasm growing between Mars and TRAPPIST-1e. The hum of the ship seemed to resonate with her thoughts, steady and resolute. The crew's uniforms added to the bridge's atmosphere of precision and preparedness. Each member of the Sojourner wore the Mars Administration's standard flight suit, reflective of the flight suits worn a millennia ago by explorers from the astronaut era. The suits were a blue reminiscent of Earth's skies, sleek, form-fitting, and engineered for functionality and style without being restrictive. The adaptive materials adjusted to temperature fluctuations and provided lightweight protection against radiation. A deep crimson stripe ran down the sleeves, symbolizing the unity and resilience of Martian society. The Mars Administration Starship service insignia was embroidered over the heart, beneath which the officer's rank was spelled out in the color associated with the rank. Personal patches displaying each crew member's certifications and assignments were subtly displayed on the opposite side of the chest. The crew's mission patch, specific to the Starship and current mission, was embroidered on the left shoulder. Commander Vera's suit bore an additional gold stripe alongside the crimson, denoting her rank as commander. Eli's uniform featured gold wings, a mark of his status as senior pilot. Orion's uniform displayed their blue flight engineer patch and their family logo, a permitted embellishment frequently used by members of large polyamorous families. Sophia's uniform, fresh and unmarred by the wear of long missions, carried the silver wings of a pilot and reflected her junior status. The bridge's soft lighting highlighted the clean lines of their attire, reinforcing the harmony between form and function. Together, the crew's appearance spoke volumes about the ideals of the Martian administration, a culture founded by engineers, scientists, and explorers driven by utility, shared risk, and a purposeful human compassion often called True Self, a thought group that claimed the majority of human Martians as adherents or students. The philosophy of True Self, central to the culture of the Martian administration, is a synthesis of mindfulness, scientific inquiry, and communal values necessitated by the unforgiving nature of Mars itself, especially in the early days of first settlement. It emphasizes interconnectedness, personal authenticity, and communal flourishing as the pillars of a harmonious society. Each individual is encouraged to explore their potential while contributing meaningfully to the collective well-being. Despite this focus on interconnectivity, varying interpretations of how to create that unity within diversity, and more importantly protect those principles while still practicing them, had occupied public debate for hundreds of years, the sight of engineers in dirty overalls having an informal philosophical discourse over a lunch of potatoes, vegetable medley and soy milk. Beside the commander, senior pilot Elias Thorne leaned casually against her chair, his rugged demeanor offset by the warm humor in his voice. Ready for another act of defiance against Newtonian physics, Commander? I promise not to tell the space cops. Thanks for your discretion, Eli, Elena replied with a faint smile. Please take your station. At the engineering console, Orion Smine's teal-streaked hair caught the light as they examined the Alcubierre-drive diagnostics. Their calm voice carried across the bridge. Drive stability is optimal. Warp rings aligned and energized. Very well, Elena said. Sophia, confirmed departure schedule with Olympus Control. Junior pilot Sophia Vade's eager tone betrayed a hint of nervousness. Scheduled for 0900 Mars time, Commander. All systems ready for departure from orbit to warp generation point. Protocol? Elena's voice was kind but firm. Sophia's cheeks reddened as she immediately recognized her fault at not physically checking the shuttle bay and scrambled to correct the misstep in her pre-flight departure checks. Apologies, Commander. Adjusting now. Starting final pre-flight checks. No need to apologize. Just be thorough, Elena said, her tone measured. Sophia nodded, her determination clear as she left for the shuttle bay. The engineering bay buzzed with activity. Holographic schematics floated in the air as technicians swarmed around the Alcubierre-drive's core and the power transfer and regulation system that connected it to the fore and aft drive rings. Orions supervised the process with meticulous care, their hands moving deftly over sleek programmable control surfaces to adjust parameters on a glowing interface. Logistics specialist Jaren Leung approached, carrying a tablet filled with supply inventories. All drones and scientific equipment are loaded, as are all the raw materials for the fabricators. If something goes wrong, it won't be for lack of preparation. Orion glanced at Jaren, their calm demeanor a contrast to the busy environment and the younger officer's energy. Thanks, Jaren. Remember, the only assurance we have is that nothing is assured. What we might lack in our loadout, we can make up for in our ingenuity. Jaren smiled and gently nodded his head once, the standard sign of receiving and understanding a truism. Even so, the slight movement created a barely perceptible change in Jaren's disposition as he floated in the zero gravity of the engine bay, the only places on the ship offering a semblance of gravity being the rotating crew habitat ring amidships. Meanwhile, Sophia had made her way down the central corridor of the ship to check on the shuttle bay, where the small ship-to-surface crew shuttle was stowed and the automated loaders busied themselves securing exploration drones. She paused to observe security specialist Arlen Kale running hand-to-hand zero-gravity combat drills with his team. His commands were sharp and precise, his silver-streaked hair gleaming under the bay's lights, his and his small squad's charcoal-gray uniforms marking their assignment as distinct from the rest of the crew. Vigilance, of others and yourself, is key, Arlen said as he demonstrated a defensive maneuver. The Trappists have an authoritarian belief system, and they use every method known to science to rigidly enforce their philosophy. This means they may not react kindly to even the best of intentions. Be ready for the unexpected. For that matter, given their belief system, just be prepared for the obvious. Sophia nodded, taking mental notes. She'd have to talk to him when schedules permitted. He was clearly a member of the Castle, a philosophical offshoot of the True Self thought group that took a more practical approach to conflict and a more skeptical stance to the intentions of others. A stance she shared, but did not talk about too much as many of her fellow students at ship school did not support that view. The more mainstream True Self students found the members of the Castle to be more than a little judgmental and too much of a throwback to the points of view that doomed humanity's first technological age to ruin. Mission Day 1. Just prior to maneuvering for final departure, the commander brought the crew together for the initial missions briefing. The small semicircular briefing room aboard the Sojourner, located just behind the command module, seemed subtly electric with quiet anticipation as the command crew gathered. Holographic star charts hovered in the center, glowing softly as they displayed the TRAPPIST-1 system. The commander nodded to Smind, who turned on inter-ship communications so that the briefing was broadcast across the ship for the benefit of the entire crew. Elena began, her voice steady and clear. Our mission is twofold: deliver the Martian Peace and Cooperation Delegation to TRAPPIST-1E and investigate opportunities for cultural exchange and understanding. We will also use our passive sensor equipment to flesh out our information on the infrastructure in the TRAPPIST system. With local permission, we will make time for scientific research. She paused briefly. Be mindful that TRAPPIST-1E is a sovereign power, and we will not violate their laws or customs in our interactions. This is especially true for those who have the opportunity to be on the surface of the planet. The commander called upon the delegation leader, Consular Eben Vallis, to provide an overview of their mission priorities. Attention shifted to him as he floated near the holographic displays. The TRAPPIST-1E religion, known as the Sacred Path of Eternal Order or simply Eternalism, is a theocratic framework governing every aspect of life on the planet. It merges elements of the major religions from pre-fall Earth into a rigid system of beliefs centered around submission to a singular, omnipotent deity called the Eternal Creator. At its core are tenets like obedience to divine authority, maintaining physical and spiritual purity, and strict adherence to the unchanging laws codified in a scripture called the Final Testament. The Society's traditions discourage technological innovation except when it aligns with eternalist goals, leading to a carefully controlled existence. The planet's governance, entirely based on this religion, is overseen by a supreme voice and high guardians, ensuring no deviation from established doctrine. While the promise of stability and order appeals to some, and seems supported by the vast majority of its people, critics argue it stifles creativity and individuality, fueling underground movements that advocate for personal freedom and cultural diversity. Interacting with such a society poses unique challenges, particularly for a delegation rooted in Martian ideals of autonomy and inclusiveness. The rest of the presentation seemed all too often to ignore or overlook the religion-based violations of human rights that would never be accepted in Martian society, in the name of maintaining a dialogue and making the way for potential scientific cooperation and resource exchange. After the briefing and dismissal of the rest of the crew from the meeting, the command crew remained in the briefing room. Smythe confirmed that the room was no longer broadcasting to the rest of the ship. The commander commented, "We do have an additional potential mission. We have reports of unrest among the Trappists. Or at least dissent, which in their society is as damning as treason. They call themselves the Unbound." "The Unbound?" Arlen asked, his gray eyes narrowing. "Yes," Elena confirmed. "A faction within Trappist society appears to oppose their government's stringent control and sees this negotiation as an opportunity to find allies in relaxing their government's insistence on adherence to the most stifling elements of their belief system. We'll need to proceed cautiously." Eli's glance lingered on Elena, unspoken understanding passing between them. Orion, seated nearby, observed Sophia's reactions with quiet interest and restrained concern as she leaned forward, her enthusiasm barely contained. "Any questions?" Elena asked. Arlen asked the obvious. "And how do we know this?" "First-class human intelligence." "On the ground." "Over a distance of 40 light-years?" Arlen, both incredulous and impressed. "That's classified," the commander said. Sophia raised a hand. "How much leeway do we have for independent investigation?" "None." "Stick to your assigned duties, pilot." "You are not a security operative," Elena replied. "Flexibility is always a key to success, but you should quest to be so flexible that you break and bring down the house with you." "Any other questions for the good of the mission?" The commander paused without response. "Very well. Departure stations." "Dismissed." Having maneuvered the ship to its approved departure point with Sophia's assistance, Eli signaled that the ship was ready for departure. The countdown echoed through the ship as the crew of Sojourner secured themselves. The Alcubierre-drive's concentric rings emitted a faint blue luminescence, signaling their readiness to warp spacetime. This was the ship's first long-distance interstellar assignment after its lengthy trial period. Elena activated the ship-wide address system. "Humans of Mars, crew of the Sojourner, Consular Vallis, and members of the Mars Administration, we will be the second ship from the solar system, mother of all humanity, to visit our cultural cousins of the Trappist-1 system. Their culture, vastly different from our own, has over 1,000 years of history. We are all the lost children of Earth, sent into the void by the short-sighted and selfish actions of our ancestors. Our mission is to forward the goals of the Mars Administration, to rejoin the dispersed branches of the human family. This mission truly begins with us." On the bridge, Elena initiated the first warp jump. Her voice was calm as she commanded, "Initiate sequence." "Sequence initiated," Sophia echoed, her confidence growing under Eli's guidance. The ship vibrated slightly as the warp bubble formed, and then, with a ripple through space-time, they were gone. The Sojourner glided silently in the velvet abyss of interstellar space, its hull reflecting the faint luminescence of distant stars. Suspended at either end of its cylindrical frame were the colossal warp field rings, masterpieces of engineering inspired by the Alcubierre-drive equations refined by Dr. Sonny White centuries earlier. These rings, intricately etched with conduits for exotic matter and glowing with an eerie blue light, were the heart of the ship's warp capabilities. At its core, the Alcubierre-drive manipulated spacetime itself to achieve faster-than-light travel without violating Einstein's theory of relativity. The equations demonstrated a revolutionary concept: spacetime could be compressed in front of the ship and expanded behind it, effectively creating a warp bubble. The ship within this bubble remained stationary relative to its internal frame of reference, avoiding the relativistic effects of time dilation. Like a bubble of sea foam on an ocean wave. Dr. White's refinements to the original theory involved altering the geometry of the warp bubble, making it more energy efficient and practical. By shaping the bubble dynamically and using precise control systems, the energy requirements were reduced to levels achievable by advanced antimatter reactors, supplemented by zero-point energy harvesting. The twin rings of the Sojourner were not merely aesthetic marvels, but essential functional components. Suspended on struts of lightweight alloys with incredible tensile strength, these rings housed the mechanisms for generating and stabilizing the warp field. Exotic matter, with its negative energy density, flowed through the conduits, guided by magnetic fields and gravitational wave modulators. The forward ring compressed spacetime ahead of the ship, creating a pathway through the fabric of the universe. The aft ring expanded spacetime behind, ensuring the bubble's motion. Together, they orchestrated a seamless distortion of spacetime, allowing the ship to traverse interstellar distances at speeds up to 10 times the speed of light, all while remaining isolated from external forces. Eli chuckled, leaning back in his seat. My first warp jump wasn't nearly this smooth. Let's just say there was an embarrassing amount of chair arm clutching and white knuckles. Laughter rippled across the bridge, easing the tension. Mission Day, 47. 47 days into the 2.6-year journey to the TRAPPIST-1 system, the Sojourner exited its warp bubble into normal spacetime to complete system and safety checks. The Sojourner was equipped with a revolutionary Mark II warp field generator that allowed for an increase in warp speed from a top speed of 10 times the speed of light for a crewed ship to 15 times the speed of light. The newness of the generator, according to flight engineer Smind, demanded more frequent checks. Commander, Smind's inquisitive but calm voice sounded on the command module. Go ahead, Orion. I'm going to need to do a realignment on the aft generator ring. There is some sort of feedback pressure from the field compression that is outside of the simulations. I estimate 20 hours until we are ready to resume warp flight. Very well. Sophia, make sure the comm buoy for Mars has all of the engineering data on that field compression feedback and Orion's realignment procedure. Yes, Commander. The rest of the crew began using the laser and sensor suites on the dorsal and ventral robotic arms to scan the exterior of the ship for any structural problems. Several hours into the system and safety checks, an alert sounded. A faint, encrypted signal appeared on their monitors. The command module seemed to freeze for a barely perceptible nanosecond before discipline returned. Analysis, Elena ordered, her tone sharp but controlled. Orion's hands moved deftly across their console. After making sure that inter-ship communications were muted and the command module was secure, they reported, it's from a communications buoy about 5 light hours away. Considering we've been here for approximately double that time, it is likely that this signal was triggered by our arrival. The message is encoded but may be incomplete. The only way this could have been waiting here for us is if the sender knew our flight plan. The incomplete nature of the signal suggests that such knowledge seems imperfect. Sophia leaned over her console to assist, her impulsive enthusiasm tempered by Orion's methodical approach. Together, they began decoding the transmission. As the bridge settled into a tense quiet, Elena ordered the process and any information related to it to a classified status. As the analysis progressed, she thought about her family, her metamours, and all of their children. For a moment, the weight of the mission and the implication of what would happen if the TRAPPIST authorities understood the real nature of their efforts pressed down on her. Steeling herself, she whispered, "For Mars, for humanity." The Sojourner, safety checks complete and an uncrewed communications buoy launched at 25 times light speed back to Mars, sped into the void, its path uncertain but its purpose resolute, as the analysis continued.